What we're knocking is if it's making you feel anything but joyful and peaceful.
Yes.
And a profound moment is when my mother said to me, anything that you can't do in the dark, in the light, there's a problem,
I love that so much.
right? If you're doing it in the dark, you better be able to do it in the light.
Yes, Mellow, and we're on. Today, ladies, we have a super special guest who is an expert in the conversation of grief. And Mello has been through a lot of life situations to extend her wisdom on that. And I can't wait to have her on. Today, we're going to be talking about her experience of being the other woman. So, welcome on, Mello. How are you doing?
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting to be here. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me, Kate. Thank you so much. I'm excited. I'm excited for today's conversation.
Can you tell us a bit more about what you do with grief?
So in 2010, I got a call from my mom, and my dad had gone into the restroom and she couldn't get him out. And so it turned out that he died very suddenly of a heart attack. And about a month later, I realized that I was a little over 6 weeks pregnant, and I had a really tough pregnancy. I had my daughter 24 weeks into gestation. She lived for 57 days and then she died. And then about a year and a half later, my mom died. And during all of this, I kept looking for, I'm going to do air quotes, grief support. And I couldn't find anyone that spoke grief. And what I mean by that is that there wasn't anyone that was understanding. There was this notion of 5 stages, and there was this kind of belief system that it's something that we, get through and get over. And so I decided to start studying um, society, culture, religion, the belief, the study of, the understanding of grief, and humanity and humans, the way that we process grief and loss, and also the way animals process grief and loss. And so what I came to is realizing that there was nobody that really spoke grief and loss to the way that I really liked. And so I wanted to cultivate a community and create some conversations and kind of shifts in the way that we perceive grief and loss, and make it a conversation that we can have without feeling that uncomfortable, feeling that discomfort. Like when we say, hey, I have a dead baby, or hey, my parents are dead, most people are like, oh my gosh, like let me crawl under the table, let me walk away at the party. I don't want to deal with that girl with the dead baby. And so I wanted to change the conversation, kind of like, being the other woman.
Mm.
We don't want to be around that girl that's the other woman. She must want my husband. She must want my man, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's really what I do in very blunt, plain terms. I have a lot of letters behind my name. I don't use them. I don't care about them. What I care about is really blowing the roof off of the conversations
Mm.
about grief and loss.
Yes, this is fantastic. And when we spoke, you said to me, we are as healthy as we are open. And I think that is such a brilliant line. And I feel it's so true. Tell me more about what you mean by that.
Well, from the time I was 15, my parents met in a very romantic, rom-com type way. My mom was 16, my dad was 24, right? I mean, I don't think that'd be acceptable in today's age, but she met him and she saw him walking down the street. And then the next day, her friend said, I want to introduce you to my cousin. And so they met, and he grabbed her and he kissed her and he said, I'm going to marry you. And 8 months later, they were married. They kind of had like a Romeo and Juliet type situation. Of course, my grandfather didn't want his 16-year-old marrying this 24-year-old man, but they got married, and they were married almost 43 years when she passed away. And when my dad passed away, in fact, 3 days shy of their 43rd wedding anniversary. And so with that came a lot of pressure and expectation in an environment that you accept certain things in a relationship. And while it was a rom-com on the outside, my dad was a cheater.
Mm.
And so I grew up with certain belief systems around a relationship. And so by the time I was 15, I believed that a relationship with a man was going to give me worth. And so instead of understanding that, having a healthy body, having a healthy mind, getting an education, being a healthy girl, just enjoying life, I had all these expectations. And so from the time I was 15, started to struggle with my mental health because I did not have a healthy viewpoint. And my mother really believed that all of those things were not meant to be discussed. And my dad had a mental mindset that, why are you crying? You want to cry? I'm going to give you something to cry about. So our emotions were taught to be stuffed. My emotions were not meant to come out. And I was a ball of emotions.
Mm.
So I believed emotions were bad. I believed that emotions were not healthy. I believed that emotions were something that was for someone that was weak. And I believed weakness was wrong and bad. And so learning and understanding and really cultivating the system that I live by and work by when someone's processing grief and loss, when somebody's processing the end of a relationship, when somebody's processing why they chose to be the other person, in the relationship when there's more than two people. And I understood that the only time that you can get healthy is when you're open and honest about who you are in the relationship. And so that was a game changer for me to say, hi, I'm Melo, and I was the mistress. Hi, I'm Melo, and I was the other woman.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I feel like oftentimes that is the very big turning point between change. And when we can accept that and be able to speak up and speak our truth, that's when change actually starts to unfold in our life. Can you tell me more about your experience of being the other woman?
Well, there's two instances. And one instance, it started when I was really young and I wasn't married the first time. It was, with someone that I had dated, and I knew he had a girlfriend, and I always say that we're looking for a cake inside a hardware store. And so I always use the comparison that I kept saying, oh my gosh, look, Kate, look at this beautiful cake that blank blank gave me, in a metaphor of the relationship. And you're like, girl, that's mold. And I'm like, no, it's this beautiful, huge cake. And you're all, where did you get that? I'm like, at the hardware store. And you're like, honey, they don't make cakes at the hardware store. And I'm like, no, they do. You're like, well, first, that's mold. You probably got that out of the restroom at the hardware store where they don't make the cakes. And so that was my first experience. And that lasted, as I'm very embarrassed to say, 6 years.
Mm.
And that relationship really shaped my identity. And so when it ended, the first person that wanted to date me, wanted to marry me, I married, because I was so afraid no one would ever want me or marry me because I was this jaded human in my mind,
Yes.
in my head.
Yes. Did you tell anyone about this experience? Do people know that you were that person?
I think that the girlfriend knew. I mean, she had an idea. I mean, so it's a very complicated scenario because I was, I secretly dated him. I was always kind of a secret.
Yeah.
And then I was, we had the same group of friends. And so I think people, I think if somebody listened to this podcast, they would be like, oh my gosh, I knew it all those years that knew us back then. I realized today that, I think you'd have to be stupid not to know.
Yeah.
But what is stupid, because that's a very strong statement. I think that
I
think
also mean from the little girl within you, like
what I was doing
as
was
opposed to
wrong.
outside of
No, I really believed in my head that, I wanted to be with him. I have to tell you, I just recently saw him for the first time a few years ago. And for the first time, I didn't feel anything because I realized that I know what love is.
yeah.
And I that was my identifier of love. and
Mm.
and he was very good to me. He bought me diamond earrings, and he identified as my best friend, and he was kind to me, and he took me around his family and friends, but I just was the secret.
Yeah.
And so he could have me around that way. So that's what I learned, the understanding of being the other woman. And then it got gnarly, because after I got married, I had an affair, and that marriage ended. And then I went into my second marriage, and during that marriage, I became the other woman again.
Mm.
And in that scenario, it was a very dangerous situation, because it was somebody that I worked around, and it could have hurt a lot of people. Nobody knew, nobody found out. The guilt almost killed me. I did try to commit suicide. And I really struggled with the guilt. And there was self-loathing and self-hatred for a really, really long time, really up until I met Chloe's dad. And it wasn't until we got pregnant with Chloe and had Chloe, and really the healing began through the process of losing Chloe, believe it or not, to really understand that it takes two to tango.
Mm.
Because if you would have talked to me 10 years, 11, 12, 13 years ago, I would have told you that it was all of my fault. The guy just sat there, and that,
Mm.
he didn't have culpability in it. He didn't have responsibility in it. And so really taking into consideration, to go back and to really look at the manipulation and both sides. And I'm not trying to say I was a victim. I'm trying to say that it's 50-50 responsibility. I was married, he was married. There's 50% responsibility.
If you
But
felt so much guilt, like so much guilt, why didn't you leave?
one of my best friends died during the time of the affair. And one of the last conversations, and we kept in, it was a very odd situation, because I would just ignore him thereafter, one of these last conversations that we ever had. But it was always very much like a joking, like, why don't you, I see you, or you see me. And he was very much my kryptonite. I was very, I felt very wanted. In my second marriage, it was very abusive. It was very physically, very verbally abusive. I didn't have any worth. And so the man that I was having an affair with, he made me feel worthy. He made me feel beautiful. He made me feel loved. And he was very kind. And so I felt like I did in the first situation. I felt love. I felt beautiful. I felt special. And I didn't know that you could have that in a day-to-day relationship at that point.
Mm.
I didn't know that I could have what I have today.
Mm. So if you had all those feelings of love, yet you had the guilt, how did you have the courage to walk away? Or how did it end?
My friend died, And we had work stuff. So there was like money involved. And I was just really tired. I was really depressed. I was already having suicidal ideation. They had put me on an antidepressant. I think that had a big influence on it because I just didn't have any energy. It takes a lot of energy to have an affair. It takes a lot
A
of
lot.
mind, mind
Planning?
space, mind space. And so as I progressed, I just didn't have the space. And what I mean is that when my best friend, he died of a brain tumor, and we were pretty, we were in our early, like had just turned 30, I believe 31, 32. I can't remember the exact age, but we were pretty young. And so him dying, we knew he was going to die, but no matter what, it was devastating. And so when he died, I think I went into shock, and that was kind of the catalyst, the kind of the motivator that I needed to just be like, I don't have anything to give. And before, it was always kryptonite, and it was a lot that sexual like attraction, and that would give me that feeling of worth. And like I had no desire to be sexual. I had no desire. That's really when I became like, sex was just off the table in terms of my mindset. And so that made it really easy. And I stayed away from him physically. Like that really helped me. Like I don't think I ever saw him. I saw him like a few years later physically. I saw him, but I was already with Chloe's dad by that time.
Did
And
you
by
have
that
to shift your workplace to do that?
I was always like an independent contractor, so like I didn't work, like I could go without seeing him if I wanted to. And those are the things that sometimes we have to be really honest with ourselves, because if you really stop and think about like your situation, and we'll say to ourselves, well, I can't financially, physically, emotionally, I just can't. I live here, he lives next door, he lives down the street, or I can't imagine what that would be like. When I got really honest with myself, we become extremely resourceful when necessary. We create the resources we need when we need them. I always talk to people when someone dies, and they will say to me, I got the money I needed to go to the funeral, but that same person 4 months earlier was saying that they didn't have the money to go on vacation.
Yeah.
But yet they were resourceful enough to get the money to go to the funeral. What changed in that 4 months? The resourcefulness. And so I get it. Like there's a difference between a vacation and a funeral, right? But what is the difference? So you'd rather go to their funeral than go on vacation and spend quality time with that person. That doesn't make sense to me. And so again, in honoring myself, I had to make the decisions to get really resourceful and make the changes I had to make.
Yeah.
And the same with, we'll call the first one Aaron.
Yeah.
Right. So my first affair was with Aaron, and with Aaron, I had to make the decision with Aaron to really like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And that meant really like letting go of everything. And like there was a time or two where I would call Aaron and say to Aaron, hey, Aaron, I want to see you. And, because Aaron and I ended up living in the same city, but Aaron could care less, and Aaron didn't love me like that. And so and me being honest with myself about that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Aaron was talking to somebody about me, and it wasn't like Aaron was like, oh my gosh, this girl was the love of my life. Oh my gosh, this girl loved me. Oh my gosh, this girl wanted to be with me. I wanted to be with this girl. We couldn't be together. This guy was like, yeah, she was great. She was life of the party. She was always up for a good time. And so when I understood that truth, and
Yeah.
I understood that truth, and I was able to really receive it, right? Because you have to be willing to receive
100%.
it. You have to be willing to hear the truth.
Yes.
Because before I would call you up and I'd be like, oh my gosh, Kate, he said I was the life of the party.
Yes.
He said I was up for a good time. Do you think that means that he's up for a good time with me tonight? And you'd be like, girl, you're over there with the mold again.
Yes.
You're over there at the hardware store, honey. There's no frosting. There's no butter frosting, buttercream. No, come home. I'll
Yeah.
take care of you. And so when all of that really initiated. So by the second affair, let's call him Tom. By the second affair with Tom, I was already done, in the sense that I knew enough in that moment when my friend died. I was like, I need to be worried about the vacation, not the funeral.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you though, I was so done that I just was like, I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. And I didn't know I could ever even go on vacation again, in all honesty. I didn't know that I was ever going to be okay again. I don't want to lie to you and be like, oh yeah, and by the way, guys, then I went on Tinder and I swiped left and there was Chloe's dad. It was not like that at all. But I did have enough sense to know that that wasn't working. And I didn't know at that point, I was never like, if you told me even 4 years ago, Melo, you're going to get on a podcast and be like, hey, I had these affairs and let's talk about them.
Right?
You are,
No
what are
way.
you smoking? Bring me some. Let me smoke some. I don't do drugs, but I will. Yeah.
100%. And how healing is it?
It's very funny because I don't think about it. And so to even like talk about it, it brings back a lot. And I want to like be like, girl, real, like, come on. Like, it's not so much healing. It's like, wow, like you've come like miles, like, the things I did, I did just so he, there's a song by Olivia Rodrigo, the things I did just so I could call him mine. And that song, I don't know what it's called, but those are the lyrics, the things I did so I could call him mine. And the things I did just so I could think in my mind, lie to myself that he was mine, and he wasn't even mine. Neither of them were. They didn't even like me.
How did you come to the awareness in yourself of looking at that side of the story? Taking the blinders off and be able to acknowledge that maybe how I see it is completely different to the way he sees it.
Chloe's dad. So when me and Tom ended things, I tried to commit suicide. I really was just really depressed. I gave up on dating altogether. I took a year off of dating. And by the way, I was still married when I ended it with Tom. And so I was fully married. And so I went through a horrible second divorce. And I just took a year off and I spent time with my parents, because again, they were still alive at this point. And I spent time with my parents, best thing I've ever done. And my cousin called me and said, hey, you want to come over? The guy she was dating at the time, her brother was around, and I knew all of her brother's family, but I had never met the brother. And I said, okay. So we went out and we went back, and it was Chloe's dad, and I met him and we started dating, and we fell in love, but Chloe's dad was a serial cheater. And so when he would cheat, I would just kind of ignore it. And we got married and we had Chloe. And 2 weeks after we had Chloe and she was in the hospital and she died, the woman he was having an affair with, he took her to the family's home. And they had a barbecue 2 weeks after Chloe's funeral. And I lost my mind. And I started to, now, as a cheater, you figure out, you know what they're doing. So I became a detective, and back then, because it was quite a while, it was 11 years ago. And so
Oh, your mic has just gone off.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Is the sound still good?
That's perfect.
So after all of that, we'd go back and forth. He would say, no, no, no. And so, and thankfully, it wasn't one person. It was different people, in the sense that he didn't grow an attachment.
Emotional, yeah.
But I realized that he wasn't going to grow an attachment. And that really educated me on someone who cheats. And that made me look inward. And we separated. By then, my mom died and we separated. And I went to him and I said, you have to stop hurting me. You can go and be with whoever you want to be. If you do not want to be with me, that's fine, but you have to stop hurting me. Please, I'm begging you, stop hurting me. And I got on my knees. And I'll never forget, because I think my best friend was on the phone. And listen, I didn't want him to walk out that door. I was terrified he wasn't going to come back. And he didn't come back for a really long time. And I thought, I'm going to walk this world alone. But it was easier to walk the world alone. And I don't want to start crying. It was easier to walk the world alone than worried if the person I wanted to walk with didn't want to be with me, because I had spent most of my life always questioning that. And I knew that I couldn't spend the rest of my life like that. So I got serious, and cue the music in the movie. I got really serious about really learning to know Melo, and just really getting to know myself, and loving myself, and being afraid of being alone. And it's funny, when you are not looking, men come a flocking, like in the grocery store, at Dillard's, at Nordstrom, they come. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want anyone except for him. And I knew that I loved him, but I loved myself more. And so we then started talking, and he's very adorable. He's very different, than Tom or than Aaron, that they were all about themselves. And he just loves me as Chloe's mom. We have this bond of a child together. And so that really taught me, when a man wants to be with you, there's nothing he won't do. A man's actions show you. And I also think that sometimes a man's worth will be based on that he believed that if he got all these women and he did all these things, that it was going to give him worth. And so knowing my dad's history, really knowing his history, and just really doing work, soul work, and really coming to understand, and really not acceptance, but forgiveness of myself. And I hate this cliche, because you listen to podcasts and you're like, come on, give me the beef, give me the meat of this, tell me what to do. And they're like, love yourself. And you're like, how do I love myself? What do I do? But it's so true. You've got to learn to give yourself grace and love yourself. Love yourself the way you think you love him. Because man, I don't think I'll ever love anybody the way I loved Aaron. I loved Aaron. He was my first love. He was my lobster. I loved him. I will always love him. But he didn't reciprocate that, obviously.
Yeah.
That is not love. Love is not hide in the back seat under a blanket.
Yes. 100%.
It's not love.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
How can women that are going through this situation come to terms with being able to see that and being able to acknowledge it and decide what they're wanting to stand for moving forward?
I think you have to really look at yourself and ask yourself, are you happy? Are you content?
Mm,
Are you willing to stay in this for a long period of time? And listen, looks fade.
mm,
Time is not on anyone's side. Time goes.
yeah.
And if you believe that, you know, there's no consequence to him being with you and her, and if you believe what's the consequence? Why, like, listen, if I had a choice to, like, if Tom came today and was like, I love you, I want to be with you, and Chloe's dad is like, I want to be with you, and I was with both of them and there was no consequence to that, like, I would really have to search long and hard. And I'm a pretty, I think, moral person at this stage in my life.
Yeah.
So no one's knocking homie because he wants to hook it up with you and with her. What we're knocking is if it's making you feel anything but joyful and peaceful.
Yes.
And a profound moment is when my mother said to me, anything that you can't do in the dark, in the light, there's a problem,
I love that so much.
right? If you're doing it in the dark, you better be able to do it in the light. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
can you snort cocaine in the broad daylight? And, like, would you go do it right now at the grocery store or in the designer section? Would you go to Louis Vuitton and snort a line of cocaine in front of everyone? No, you wouldn't, because there's shame in that.
Mm,
There's shame. I mean, it may be, fancy or fashionable to some people, but it's not. It's illegal. You can't do it.
mm,
So having an affair, there's a certain shame to it.
mm.
And so it's not supposed to be. Now, polyamory, people in more than with a relationship with more than one person, those are different scenarios if it's agreeable.
Yeah.
But when there's betrayal and when there's lies and when there's shame and there's not trust and there's, go hide in the car
Mm,
and don't tell anybody we're together and put the hotel room in your name, I'll give you cash later, all of those things, which, by the way, I may or may not have done, right? And so all of those things, let me ask you, are they bringing you joy?
mm.
Can you bring your guy to your a barbecue with all your girlfriends?
Yes.
Can you bring her to your mom and dad and say, hey, dad, this is my guy and he loves me the way you love my mom or you love your wife? And
Mm,
if you can answer me yes, then you shouldn't be listening to this other than for the comic relief, right? Because in my head, I think I'm really funny. But if you can't answer yes, then you have to take inventory, a self inventory, and ask yourself, if you answer, you feel shame of any of the things I just said, then you have to reassess. And here's the thing, listen, I'm not here to, like, take you away from your guy. I'm here for you to give him consequence and have a serious discussion
mm.
and be honest with him. This is what I want. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know what I want. Okay, well, you don't want this. So you got to have a serious conversation. This is not what I want.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want, but it's not this. Where are we going from here?
Yeah. Yes.
And if he can't give you a solid answer to be like, hey, I'm going to leave her or I'm going to stay with her. If he says to you, I'm going to stay with her, ask yourself, how does that feel? Can you live with that?
Mm,
Can you live with that? Can you live with being in the dark for the rest of your life? And why would you choose to live in the dark? I think is the bigger question. I
Yeah.
always tell my girlfriends, listen, if he's having an affair with you, I really doubt that they're making heart-shaped hamburgers at home. I really doubt that everything's hunky dory at home. I really doubt that everything's all good at home. Listen, me and Chloe's dad, we were great. And then our daughter died. Our marriage fell apart. So anyone could get in there.
Mm.
And now I'm not saying on purpose, they didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And some of the girls, they knew all about it. And he would talk to them instead of me.
Yeah.
But that's not whoever is he's talking to. That's his fault. That's my fault.
Mm.
You have no culpability in their marriage other than you've got to be honest with yourself and then be willing to talk to him and be honest with him to come to an agreement of what you're willing to accept and not accept. And then stand by it, sister. Because we all know, right?
Yes.
I've gone on keto 7 times this last week. You know why? Every day I start and every day I cannot keep to those rules of keto.
Yeah.
So I have to restart the next day. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to diet. You get what I'm saying, right? At least I'm trying to clean up the diet.
Yeah.
At least listen, I don't know where there's a hardware store that I try to get cake anymore.
Mm.
I don't think about the green cake anymore.
Mm.
I can't remember the last time I thought about the green cake.
So one thing that I want to ask on this is for the women. I think this topic of willing to have the hard conversation is so big. And a lot of the times we fear having that difficult conversation because of the loss that could come up if we do face that difficult conversation. So because of like your expertise around grief, one of the last questions that I want to leave you with is, or leave, I guess, with and ask you is, how do people come to terms with the grief of a future that they painted, or even just simply not even the future that they painted? Absolutely, there's their expectations, but also the grief of a relationship that they've had, because whether or not the outcome, so if they have that conversation, they could be fearing the outcome, and we have to face that potential grief. How can they face that?
Well, it's very normal to grieve the should-haves, the could-haves, the would-haves, right? The coulds, the woulds, and the shoulds. The shoulds are first and probably the biggest in this scenario because it should be me. It should be us. It should be me on that vacation. It should be me in her shoes. It should be me in the house. It should be me at the work party and so on, right? All the scenarios in our minds. And those are played by those assumptions. And so when you're grieving the shoulds, what I encourage you to do is to get busy and give yourself a time limit each day to go into those shoulds. Your feelings are absolutely 5,000 times valid, okay? But you must get busy. So whether that be through exercise or fresh air, listen, I want a Peloton to look at. Am I going to get on it? No, but okay. But get on the Peloton for like 5 minutes, 30 minutes, go outside, walk for 5 minutes, 30 minutes. So you start each day and you get busy, whether that's for 5 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, as long as it's healthy getting busy, right? Don't find another guy to have an affair with. Don't go and jump into another scenario, but just get busy. Something healthy. Don't go to the bar or the pub. Just go get busy, something healthy, right? So then the woulds, right? What would have happened? What would have happened if I would have stayed quiet? Why did I listen to that podcast with After Chloe? What would have happened if I would have met him 5 years before he got married? What would happen if I was 15 pounds lighter? What would happen, right? All the would haves. So when you start to think about those woulds, allow them to come. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write all those woulds on a piece of paper. And then I want you to take that piece of paper in your sink, right? Where there's water, or in your bathtub where there's water. And I want you to set it on fire, burn it. Then it's not some type of ritual, sister. Stay with me. Then what I want you to do is I want you to go and I want you to get dressed. Get dressed. Put on your prettiest red lipstick. Dior makes a really good one. Yeah, spend the money if you can. If you can't, Revlon has a really good dupe. Get a really good red lipstick, all tones, it works. Get a good red lipstick on, and then go and buy yourself a nice dinner, a nice piece of cake from a real bakery, whatever makes you feel really good, right? Go and do something good for yourself in public. Don't eat the cake at the house because you want to run back home. Go out in public. And you'll be surprised, because me being a secret, I couldn't go to restaurants. I couldn't go out anywhere,
Yeah.
or I could only go to certain places. So go somewhere that you'd want to go with him, but you couldn't, right? And you'll be surprised. And it's the act of that will get you out of that mindset.
Yeah.
Do it every time, those would haves. Now, the coulds, right? What could be, what can be. Okay. So you're right. You don't know what can be. We don't know what could be. But what we do know is what's not working. And what we know is that you're in grief and loss and you're devastated. You're on the kitchen floor. You probably ate 5 pints of Ben and Jerry's. And it's okay. We forgive you. We want you to forgive yourself. But what I want you to do right now is I want you to go and wash your face. I know you haven't washed your face. You're probably in your pajamas from 5 days ago. Go take them off. Stop calling in sick to work. Stop missing the Zoom meetings. Get back into your normal life. Now, after you've gotten back into your normal life, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down 5 non-negotiables. Not only about taking care of yourself, because that's your responsibility to eat, sleep, and to do the things you need to do, including combing your hair. Don't judge me. I don't really comb my hair, but I want you to comb your hair every day. So I want you to choose 5 non-negotiables, whether that's reading for 5 minutes, watching the television for 5 minutes, exercising for 5 minutes, going and shopping online for 5 minutes. You're going to do 5 things for yourself every day for 5 minutes. And that's going to create healthy habits in your life. And when you have healthy habits, it's going to create self-love. Because listen, if you were there with your guy, you would do anything for him for 5 minutes or more, wouldn't you?
Yes.
So those things are what you're going to do as you're grieving. Now, also give yourself time to grieve. You're allowed to feel bad. You're allowed to feel sad. You're allowed to feel mad. You're allowed to feel whatever. When you get mad, go take a boxing class. When you get sad, go climb a mountain and listen to Olivia Rodrigo's song, The Things I Did to Call Him Mine. When you feel frustrated, you go and you do something like painting or coloring. You're going to have to be your biggest advocate through this, my friend, because there's such a shame that you've created in your mind. But you've got to understand, listen, and listen closely. You are a beautiful human, individually made. And you are worth love and care, regardless of what you've done, regardless of where you are, regardless of where you've sought love. You deserve love. And don't let anyone ever show you or tell you otherwise.
100%. 100%. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Melo. I really appreciate your perspectives and your experience on life. I think a lot of women will be able to relate to that.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. I think we could go on for like ages on this story. And I feel like we've only covered a small section, but I appreciate the time that we did get to share together.
Yes, anytime, Kate, anytime. Thank you so much for having me. What the work you're doing is so powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Kate.